Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple. Expected goals and expected points are both terms which are becoming more and more popular. They have been used within the statistical and analytics world for years now, but in the last 2 or 3 years, it's become more and more common to the general football populace. Many fans see the use of these metrics, however, some fans are against them, as they see these statistics as completely useless. So in today's videos, we'll look at what these stats are, why they're useful, the pros and cons of these stats, and why, in some situations, they may not be useful after all. Just quickly before that, the season may be over, but Football Made Simple will continue to upload football content, everything from tactics, manager profiles, the impact of new signings, and more. So hit subscribe and the bell icon so that you don't miss out. So anyway, let's get into the main section of this video. To understand these statistics, we need to look at football as a whole throughout the years. Decades ago in football, the game was just looked at by the final score. Coaches only cared about whether their teams won or lost. And yes, the goal of football will always be to try and get as many points as possible. But soon, coaches realized they needed to know the reasons they won and lost in order to make changes for the future. Possession became a major factor, with coaches realizing that the more you have the ball, the more likely you are to score, and the less likely you are to concede. And then shots became a factor. The feeling was the more often you shot, the more likely you were to score. And soon after that, shots on target became the successor. But not all shots are created equal, and that's where expected goals comes in. We'll start with the expected goals definition. Well, expected goals, or XG, whether you know it or not, are statistics that you already use. How many times have you seen your team create several great chances, waste all of them, only for the opposition to score a 30-yard volley in the last minute? After the game you'd say, they got lucky, we deserved the win, we should have scored at least 3. And that is exactly what XG looks to measure. Expected goals may be a misnomer. If the term chance quality was used instead, there would be less complaints about this metric. Because that's just what it does. It measures the quality of the shots a team or a player took. And it gives a number between 0 and 1 as to how likely that shot would be to go in. 0 is no chance of a goal, and 1 is a guaranteed goal. But in football, there's no such thing as a guaranteed goal. So how is this magical number between 0 and 1 obtained? While companies such as Opta have statistics of over 300,000 shots in the past few years. So it's quite simple. So for example, let's say they have 20,000 shots worth of data from the right edge of the box, and 8,000 of these shots have gone in. Quite simply, the XG there would be 0.4. And it's also important to note that anything with an XG of over 0.38 is considered a big chance. XG takes into account distance from goal, angle, whether the ball was shot with the head or the foot in order to come up with this number. So for example, a shot from here would have a much lower XG than a shot from a similar zone but on the angle. So what does all this mean practically? So when we say chance quality, imagine 2 teams are playing each other and Team A finished with 5 shots on target and Team B finishes with 10 shots on target. On paper it looks like Team B did better. But then if you have a look at the shot map, Team B had all 10 shots from 30 yards, and Team A had all 5 of them from inside the box. From this, you can see that Team A actually made the better chances and may have deserved a win. Now let's look at the pros and cons of this measure before diving deeper into the practical use. The major advantages is it tells us more than the scoreline by showing us who deserved to win based on the quality of the chances, and is more detailed than elements such as regular shots on target. In addition, XG can help us analyze players more in depth by eliminating factors such as luck from the analysis and assessing the player on their potential to score more goals in the future. Now on the flip side, there are some cons to XG. The first point to note is that XG does not replace real goals, so extremists of expected goals may overstate the importance of this stat. Secondly, this stat does not account for the player's ability. That means, as in our prior example, if Messi was to have a shot from the inside right zone, the XG here, for example, would be 0.4. At the same time, if Lee Cattermole had a shot from there, the XG would still be the same. It is interesting to note, however, that finishing skill is not as important as you would think. Of course, elite players like Messi will tend to overperform their XG, but their real strength is being able to take a high number of shots from high XG areas. So for example, in 2012 Messi scored 91 goals in the calendar year, but 78 of them came from within the box. So this is an example of elite players taking shots from high percentage positions. Another disadvantage of XG is that it does not reflect the game state. What this means is that were a team to score the first goal of the game with a 0.3 shot and then decide to defend the lead over the course of the game, the opposition could rack up many low XG shots, and at the end of the game it will make it look as though Team A was lucky, when it may have in fact been a choice of tactic. A good example of this is the recent Champions League final. As Liverpool scored early, they were happy to be defensive and hit on the break, meaning that Spurs had the higher XG through a high volume of shots. But in reality, had the game been 0-0, Liverpool would have chosen to attack a lot more. In addition, many XG models don't account for the positioning of defenders when the shot is taken, which may reduce the accuracy of this metric. Sean Dyche is the most famous overperformer of expected goals conceded, as he puts a block between the shot and the goal. So the XG from this region may still be 0.5, but the model doesn't take into account that there's 6 defenders between the striker of the ball and the goal itself. Now let's move on to how expected goals is supposed to be used. Expected goals may have started as a way to scout players. We have seen many players have a wonder season before dropping down lower, but you'll notice that this happens less frequently now. This is due to more analytics and statistics such as XG preventing this. What expected goals does is show how a player is likely to develop over the course of their career, because in mathematics, things tend to revert to their mean. So for example, when Chelsea signed Gonzalo Higuain, they could have had a thorough look at his XG. Here are his goals from the past 4 seasons before joining Chelsea. As you can see, his goals may have been dropping, but when looking at the raw data, it can be tempting to give a player the benefit of the doubt that this may have just been an off-season. But by looking at the XG, they would have been able to see that this wasn't a case of a player being unlucky with his finishing. Instead, this would have signified a player unable to get into dangerous positions anymore. It can also show where teams should be worried about their performance. A great example of this in the Champions League is Liverpool against Barcelona. On paper, the first leg was a 3-0 easy win for Barcelona. Not much to worry about in the second leg, right? However, a look at XG shows that there was less than 0.6 goals in it, showing that the match was much closer than it seemed, and that the Barcelona defense was leaky, but Liverpool finished poorly. And we all know how the second leg ended. Okay, so how does XG tie into expected points? Now comes the exciting part. By having a team's XG for and XG against, it means that we can calculate a team's expected points. This table from the short fuse shows how XG differential is used to calculate what percentage chance of winning a team has. Don't worry too much about how it's calculated, but the main takeaway is that a team's expected points can be calculated over a long period of time. And again, trends usually revert to their mean, so it alerts the club as to what needs to be improved. So for example, 2016-17 saw Chelsea win the league, fairly comfortably on paper. But a deeper look at the stats shows that they massively overperformed their goals scored. At the same time, City massively underperformed, especially defensively because of some reason. So just from these stats, you can see that City needed to improve their defense by not conceding low XG chances, and Chelsea needed to improve their attack massively despite winning the league. So what happened the next season? City took action to improve this defense by replacing Bravo with Ederson, and Chelsea sold their overperforming striker, Costa, for one who wasn't as prolific, Alvaro Morata. And lo and behold, the next season City and Spurs finished above Chelsea, just as XG had predicted the season before. United also make a great example. In 2017-18, United finished second, and the talk around the club was what they could do to finish first the next season. But a look at the XG showed that without major work on the squad, they would slip down to 6th, as Mourinho repeatedly pointed out. So their focus should have been on consolidating their place rather than looking too far up the table. And in the next season, guess what happened? Again, XG proved to be correct. And the last example, during the start of Solskjaer's reign, United's results picked up. But analysts were quick to point out that they were overperforming their XG, and many non-XG fans were not a fan of this. Over the course of time, we can see that results reverted to the mean, which is why United finished where they did. And again, this is an example of how XG should be used. So when your team overperforms XG, it does not mean they're necessarily bad and you shouldn't celebrate their wins. It's just an indicator of what will happen if the issue is not addressed. If your team's defense or goalkeeper is saving too many goals, it means that the defense needs improvement. And lastly, I can still see why many people do not like the stat, as some analysts push the XG agenda too hard. As an article in Paste magazine pointed out, it means that XG may become a victim of Goodhart's law. This law in simplistic terms states that when a statistic becomes the target of your performance, it stops being a useful statistic. Meaning that statistics should be used to help how your team plays, not be the goal of your performance. So if a team played with their only goal being to take the highest possible XG chances, they cease to be effective. This is often seen as trying to walk the ball into the net. So like all stats, XG helps us to understand the game. But it in itself is not the aim of the game. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hit subscribe and like for more content like this. But aside from that, that's all for today. And remember, keep it simple.